The atmosphere over Canada just broke. And I don't mean that figuratively. Something happened 30 kilometers above the Earth's surface that has locked the entire country into a winter pattern that meteorologists are calling one of the most dangerous in modern history. Right now, as I'm recording this, Arctic air is sitting over Canada, and it's not moving. The polar vortex split into two pieces in early February. One of those pieces is parked directly over North America, and every single forecast model, the ECMWF, the GFS, the Canadian models, they all agree on one thing. This pattern is not breaking before early March at the earliest. Let me tell you what that actually means. Toronto just recorded its snowiest month in 89 years of records. Yukon hit minus 55.7 degrees Celsius, the coldest temperature in Canada in 50 years. A First Nation community of 7,000 people had to be evacuated when a power line snapped in minus 40-degree cold. Over 4,000 residents gone. Evacuated to Winnipeg and Thompson because their homes are unlivable. And this is just the beginning of what I need to tell you. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what the weather looks like in your area. Because depending on where you are in Canada, you're either dealing with record-breaking snow, life-threatening cold, or you're on the West Coast wondering what winter even is. The contrast is that extreme. Here's what almost nobody outside the meteorological community understood until it was too late. In late November 2025, a stratospheric sudden warming event was detected. Only the fourth early season event like this in 70 years. Then in mid-January, a second one hit. Then in early February, the big one arrived. Temperatures in the stratosphere, 30 kilometers up, jumped 40 to 50 degrees Celsius above normal. The polar vortex didn't just weaken, it split completely in half. One core stayed over Siberia, the other core dropped straight down over North America. When that happens, the jet stream becomes unstable. It stretches, it amplifies, it creates these massive north-south waves instead of flowing smoothly west to east, and those waves lock in place. High pressure parks itself over Greenland, low pressure sits over Hudson Bay, and eastern Canada gets trapped on the eastern side of that trough, with nowhere for the cold air to escape. Atmospheric scientist Judah Cohen described what he was seeing on the models as the craziest polar vortex stretch ever. He said the forecasts were showing a full split with a major vortex core in North America. And he was right. By mid-February, that's exactly what happened. The European model, the American model, Canada's seasonal model, they all locked onto the same solution. Cold air from the Rockies eastward through February. Potential for that cold to persist into early March. Let me walk you through what this has actually done to Canada, province by province, because the numbers are staggering. Ontario is getting destroyed. Toronto's total snowfall by early February hit 132 centimeters. That's 236% of normal, the biggest snowfall anomaly in the entire country. January alone brought 88.2 centimeters to Pearson Airport. That is the snowiest January and the snowiest month of any month since records began in 1937. The previous record was 86.6 centimeters, set in December 1944. Toronto shattered it. On January 25th, a single storm dropped 46 centimeters in one day at Pearson. Downtown Toronto got hammered even harder with lake effect enhancement, pushing totals to 56 centimeters in some neighborhoods. That 46-centimeter daily total at Pearson broke the all-time single-day record that had stood since 1965. But it's not just the snow, it's the relentless cold. Toronto logged 18 consecutive days without the temperature rising above freezing. That's the longest streak in more than a decade. The average winter temperature hit minus 5.3 degrees Celsius, the coldest since 2018. And here's the thing that makes this so dangerous. When you get that much snow, combined with extreme cold, the snow doesn't melt. It accumulates, and accumulates, and accumulates. By mid-February, some Ontario cities were reporting 300 centimeters of snow on the ground. That's nearly 10 feet of compacted snow sitting on roofs, blocking streets, burying cars. Northern Ontario faced even worse conditions. Communities in the far north experienced wind chills of -45 to -48. Schools closed across remote First Nations. An elder in a fly-in community was found outside in the cold and could not be revived. On February 18th, the Greater Toronto area got hit with a mix of freezing rain, ice pellets, and snow. The Ontario Provincial Police responded to 160 collisions in a single day, 160 crashes in 24 hours across the GTA and Hamilton area. 4 elementary school students were hospitalized after their school bus crashed on ice-covered roads in Oxford County. Now, let's talk about Quebec. Montreal is enduring its coldest sustained stretch since 2018. Through early February, the city averaged -8.9 degrees Celsius. That doesn't sound extreme until you realize that's an average, meaning many days were significantly colder. Wind chills regularly hit -20 to -30. But the real story in Quebec is what happened to the power grid. On January 25th, equipment failure at the Hampstead substation cut power to over 20,000 customers in Montreal. That substation has been in service since 1955. Its replacement isn't scheduled until 2029. During the outage, temperatures sat well below -20. A woman was found dead in her Montreal West home. Hydro-Québec issued Level 2 grid alerts for the first time since February 2023. They begged customers to reduce consumption during peak hours, 6 to 10 a.m. and 4 to 8 p.m. The system was that close to rotating blackouts. And then, the snow came. Montreal's February 12th to 15th storm series produced a 74-centimeter 4-day snowfall total. That's the snowiest 4-day period since records began in 1941. Over 13,000 Hydro-Québec customers lost power in Côte-Saint-Luc during the January cold wave. The Canadian Red Cross had to open emergency shelters. If you're getting value from this breakdown, hit that like button and share this video with anyone in Canada who needs to understand what's happening. Because what I'm about to tell you about the Atlantic provinces is going to shock you. Newfoundland and Labrador is experiencing something that hasn't happened in over a century. This is guaranteed to be the snowiest February on record. Meteorologist Rodney Barney stated on February 23rd that this was pretty much a guarantee at this point. The next snowiest February dates back to 1921. St. John's recorded 48 consecutive hours of continuous snowfall, 2 full days of non-stop snow. The city has received 328 centimeters this season. That's over 10 feet. And it's still February. Paradise. Newfoundland got absolutely buried. One storm alone dumped 74.3 centimeters. Mount Pearl recorded 65. St. John's hit 62.8. Wind gusts at Bonavista reached 109 kilometers per hour. Cape Pine saw 105. Those are near hurricane-strength winds combined with blizzard conditions. 3,000 customers on the Avalon Peninsula lost power, some for days. When crews tried to fix downed lines in a blizzard with 100 km/h winds, they literally could not safely operate bucket trucks. But here's what makes Newfoundland's situation truly unprecedented. The Bay d'Espoir hydroelectric plant shut down completely for the first time since 1967. Frazil ice, massive sheets of ice the size of mattresses, blocked the water intake. Divers had to go underwater to remove them. This plant provides a significant portion of the province's power. The shutdown happened during one of the coldest periods of the winter. Newfoundland narrowly avoided rotating blackouts across the entire province. Nova Scotia received roughly 50 centimeters more snow than this same time last year. Nova Scotia Power activated its Emergency Operations Center twice, on January 19th and again on February 23rd. During the January 19th storm, 140,000 customers lost power, 140,000 homes and businesses without electricity during an extreme cold event. The current nor'easter tracking into the region is forecast to deliver 25 to 40 centimeters to the south shore, with wind gusts up to 90 kilometers per hour in exposed coastal areas. Wave heights are predicted at 5 to 7 meters during high tide. Storm surge could push water levels above the highest astronomical tide, meaning coastal flooding is expected in Shelburne, Queens, Lunenburg, and Halifax counties. Prince Edward Island faced a storm in early February that closed the Confederation Bridge for over 14 hours. The general manager called it one of the longest ever closures and perhaps the longest in the bridge's history. All scheduled surgeries at Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Charlottetown were postponed. A provincial by-election had to be delayed because of the weather. New Brunswick is under weather alerts across every single county as another 20 to 30 centimeters approaches, with wind chills between -30 and -40. Now let me take you to the Prairies, because what happened there rewrote the record books. Saskatchewan shattered multiple all-time cold records that had stood for decades. Key Lake hit -48.5 degrees Celsius, a record since monitoring began in 1976. Nipawin reached -41.8, breaking a record from 1,954. Yorkton dropped to -39.2. These aren't just cold temperatures. These are temperatures that break infrastructure. At -40, exposed metal becomes brittle. Diesel fuel gels. Tires can shatter. Batteries die instantly. And the wind chill made it worse. Saskatoon saw wind chills of -49. Regina hit -47. At those temperatures, exposed skin develops frostbite in under 5 minutes. Sask Energy set a new peak single-day natural gas consumption record at 1.72 petajoules on January 22nd. To put that in perspective, every 10 degrees below zero increases natural gas use by roughly 40% in an average home. The system was at maximum capacity. Then, on February 17th and 18th, the Prairie Megastorm hit. Prudhomme, Saskatchewan recorded 50 centimeters of snow. Prince Albert got 35. Saskatoon and Regina both saw 19. Freezing rain extended as far south as Regina. Wind gusts of 70 to 90 kilometers per hour created whiteout conditions across the entire southern half of the province. Saskatchewan's highway hotline logged 2.5 million visits in 36 hours. Half the province's highways were under travel not recommended advisories. One person was killed in a crash involving 3 semi-trailers near Broadview. Downed power poles near Gull Lake left entire communities without electricity. Schools closed across all 3 prairie provinces. Environment Canada meteorologist Chris Stammers described the system as a Montana low. He said these are notorious heavy snowfall producers. They're very slow-moving, so they give prolonged periods of snow. Alberta saw 15 to 40 centimeters across central and southern regions. The highway between Edmonton and Red Deer became impassable due to drifting snow. Calgary police logged 143 collision incidents in a single 16-hour window on February 17th. The RCMP issued a rare tow ban on Highway 2. When they issue a tow ban, that means conditions are so bad that even tow trucks cannot safely operate. Edmonton's extreme weather response was activated on February 16th, with temperatures expected to approach -38 at the airport, potentially the coldest since the -40 stretch in January 2024. Manitoba's story is different. It's not just about cold and snow. It's about a complete infrastructure failure that displaced thousands of people. On December 28, 2025, a 300-meter power line spanning the Nelson River snapped. The Pimicikamak Cree Nation lost all electricity. Temperatures sat well below -20. Over 4,000 residents were evacuated to Winnipeg, Thompson, and other communities. More than 200 homes were rendered completely unlivable from burst pipes, flooding, and sewage backup. The water treatment plant was severely damaged. The Canadian Armed Forces had to deploy engineering teams. Repairs are estimated to take months. Think about that for a second. An entire community of 7,000 people, a single power line fails in extreme cold. And within days, over half the population has to be evacuated because their homes are no longer habitable. That's the cascading effect of extreme cold on infrastructure. Water mains freeze and burst. Sewage backs up, black mold grows, contamination spreads, and in -40-degree temperatures, repair crews can't work outside for more than a few minutes at a time. Before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to this channel with notifications on. This extreme winter pattern is not over, and the transition into March is going to be volatile. If you want to stay ahead of the next major weather events, you need to be subscribed. Manitoba also saw the Trans-Canada Highway close between Sydney and Headingley during blizzard conditions with 80 km/h gusts. Winnipeg issued a cold weather safety advisory on February 20th as temperatures plunged below -25 with wind chill. All schools in Winnipeg closed during the February storm, the first time that's happened since 2022. Wind chills in southeastern Manitoba hit -49 overnight. Steinbach faced daytime highs of -26. At -49 wind chill, exposed skin can get frostbite in less than 5 minutes. Now, let's talk about the territories, because they experienced the most extreme absolute cold on the entire continent. On December 23, 2025, Braeburn, Yukon recorded -55.7 degrees Celsius. That's the lowest temperature measured in Canada in 50 years. Ross River and Faro endured sustained lows of -50 to -55 for multiple consecutive days. Water delivery trucks couldn't operate, fuel delivery trucks couldn't run. Residents had to melt snow for dishwater because the water system couldn't function. Yukon's power grid hit an all-time peak demand record of 123 megawatts on December 22nd. The system's maximum capacity is roughly 140 megawatts. Energy officials warned of possible rolling blackouts. Nunavut set its own records. On February 21st, Eureka recorded -50.4 degrees Celsius, breaking its previous record of -50 set in 1964. Grise Fiord hit -43.4, smashing the old record of -41.9 from 2013. Yellowknife dropped to -44.3, its coldest temperature since February 2021. The Northwest Territories set a record for snow depth in mid-February at 74 centimeters, a measurement never previously reached that early in the season. And here's the contrast that makes this winter so bizarre. While eastern and central Canada freeze, British Columbia is experiencing something completely different. Vancouver may record its first snow-free winter since 1982 to 1983. 0 centimeters of snow at Vancouver International Airport through early February. On February 5th, Bella Bella hit 19.5 degrees Celsius, and Tatlioko Lake reached 18.1, both all-time February records. Cherry blossoms were blooming in North Vancouver by January 19th. An Environment Canada meteorologist called the winter very abnormal. But even in BC, the pattern isn't uniform. The interior has seen well below normal snowfall. Kamloops received only 32.4 centimeters versus its 63-centimeter average. The Okanagan got just 14 centimeters against its 61.6-centimeter normal, yet the mountains tell a different story. Provincial snowpack averaged 107% of normal as of January 1st. Some regions, like the Central Coast, hit 160%. Lake Louise reported 5.2 meters of December snowfall, the most ever recorded. That creates a serious problem. When all that snow melts in spring, the BC River Forecast Center is warning of increased hazard for spring snowmelt-related flooding. Let me explain why this winter is genuinely dangerous, not just uncomfortable. At wind chills of -40 to -48, exposed skin can develop frostbite in 5 to 10 minutes. At -50 and below, that window shrinks to under 5 minutes. Environment Canada's Wind Chill Index marks -28 as the threshold where frostbite risk begins. Much of eastern and central Canada has spent weeks below that line, but the danger goes far beyond cold exposure. A landmark Canadian Medical Association journal study found that heavy snowfall of 20 centimeters or more is associated with a 16% increase in heart attack hospitalizations and a 34% increase in heart attack deaths among men. Shoveling snow raises heart rates to 97% of predicted maximum within 10 minutes. Toronto received 46 centimeters in a single day. Montreal accumulated 74 centimeters in 4 days. The cardiac risk during those events was extraordinary. During Winter Storm Fern, 3 people died of cardiac events while shoveling in a single Pennsylvania county. Carbon monoxide poisoning poses another deadly threat during power outages. During Storm Fern, one Nashville hospital treated over 40 children for CO poisoning, linked to unsafe indoor heating practices. In Montreal, the Hydro-Quebec outages left over 20,000 homes without heat in sub-20 conditions. A woman was found dead. The Consumer Product Safety Commission issued 2 separate carbon monoxide warnings in January and February 2026. Infrastructure failures cascade in extreme cold in ways most people don't understand. Road salt becomes ineffective below -10 degrees. Heat pumps lose performance below -10, and many cannot function at all at -30 to -40. Water mains freeze and burst. The Pimicikamak crisis demonstrated exactly how a single point of failure can render an entire community unlivable. Hydro-Quebec's Hampstead substation, in service since 1955, with replacement not scheduled until 2029, revealed the vulnerability of aging infrastructure during periods of maximum stress. Vulnerable populations face compounding risks. Toronto was sheltering approximately 12,000 people nightly, with 1,275 additional winter spaces activated. Montreal added 530 warming center spaces, but advocates warned that demand remains insurmountable. When you're homeless in -30-degree wind chill, the difference between a warming center and exposure can be measured in hours. An elder in a northern Ontario fly-in First Nation was found outside in the cold and could not be revived. The economic toll is staggering and still being counted. Preliminary estimates for Winter Storm Fern alone, the massive system that hit from January 23rd to 27th, exceed $100 billion in combined US-Canada economic impact. That includes property damage, business interruptions, airline cancellations, and supply chain disruptions. Insured losses reached at least $1 billion. A separate December ice storm caused $342 million in insured Canadian damage by itself. For context, Canada's severe weather-insured losses surpassed $8 billion in 2024 for the first time in history. Winter 2025 to 2026 is on track to add significantly to that total. Aviation has been in near-continuous crisis. Since January 1st, an estimated 6,100 flights have been disrupted, affecting over 560,000 passengers across Canada. Toronto Pearson alone saw over 600 cancellations during Storm Fern. On February 24th, Pearson recorded 151 cancellations from ripple effects of the nor'easter hitting Atlantic Canada. During the February 17th to 18th storms, Calgary Airport saw 82 cancellations and 88 delays. On February 20th, Pearson, Calgary, and Vancouver combined for 587 flight disruptions in a single day. Energy costs have spiked across the country. In Alberta, every 10-degree drop below zero increases natural gas use by approximately 40% and electricity use by 8% in an average home. 14% of Canadian households already reported keeping their homes at uncomfortable or unsafe temperatures due to unaffordable heating costs, even before this winter began. Now, multiply that stress across months of sustained extreme cold. Agricultural impacts are mounting across the prairies. Livestock producers had to increase feed volumes sharply. Animals require roughly 10 to 15% more feed for every 10 degrees below their lower critical temperature. When you're dealing with weeks of -30 to -40, feed costs become unsustainable for some operations. Highway closures disrupted supply chains. Via Rail canceled 12 routes on the Quebec City to Windsor corridor during Storm Fern. Municipal snow removal budgets stretched to their limits early in the season, across multiple cities. Hit that subscribe button right now if you haven't already, because what I'm about to tell you about the forecast is critical. This pattern shows no meaningful signs of breaking before early March, and you need to understand what that means. The atmospheric setup has 2 main drivers keeping it locked in place. First, La Niña was active throughout the winter. Historically, La Niña winters carry a 60 to 75% probability of producing a stratospheric sudden warming event. Second, the quasi-biennial oscillation sat in its easterly phase, which nearly doubles the odds of a disrupted polar vortex. Combined, one analysis suggested a 90% chance of a cold winter for eastern North America. Those drivers played out exactly as forecast. The polar vortex split in early February created 2 separate cores, One stayed over Siberia, the other parked itself over North America. When that configuration locks in, it doesn't release quickly. Typically, it takes 4 to 6 weeks after a major SSW event for the polar vortex to recover and re-establish its normal westerly circulation. The early February event puts the earliest potential recovery in mid to late March. Judah Cohen's analysis from February 17th projected one more stretched polar vortex in early March that would return cold to eastern Canada and the eastern United States. Severe Weather Europe's spring forecast showed above normal snowfall over the southern half of Canada through March. Environment Canada senior climatologist David Phillips stated flatly on February 7th that it's very, very rare to get 4 months in a row with the same kind of cold conditions. He said spring is not going to rush to spring this year. But there are 2 potential escape routes. La Niña is rapidly dissolving. NOAA gives a 60% chance of transition to ENSO-neutral conditions by February through April 2026, with El Niño potentially emerging by summer. That removes one of the atmospheric drivers sustaining the cold pattern. The second route is the polar vortex recovery itself, but as I mentioned, that timeline points to mid to late March at the earliest. The transition into March is going to be volatile, not gradual. When blocking patterns finally break down, they often do so abruptly. That can trigger rapid temperature swings, additional storm systems, and unpredictable weather. Weather forecaster Matt Makins warned at CattleCon 2026 that eastern Canada and the U.S. Great Lakes region are likely facing a delayed spring start, with snowpack and ice keeping temperatures cooler well into March and April. And that brings up the next threat: spring flooding. British Columbia's provincial snowpack at 107% of normal, with some regions at 160%, creates elevated flood hazard during the May to June melt season. Eastern Canada's massive snowpack, Toronto at 236% of normal and St. John's buried under record February totals, creates significant melt risk depending on how quickly March and April temperatures warm. The National Weather Service Grand Forks office is already forecasting minor to isolated moderate flooding in the Red River Basin. The closest historical comparison to this winter is 2013 to 2014, the polar vortex winter that popularized the term in public consciousness. Both winters featured SSW-triggered vortex disruptions, prolonged cold, and deep southward jet stream dives. But 2025 to 2026 has exceeded that benchmark. Toronto's 88.2 centimeter January snowfall shattered records, dating to 1,937. The 1,998 ice storm remains the single most destructive winter event in Canadian history, killing 34 Canadians, cutting power to 4.7 million people, and causing over $3 billion in damage. But the geographic breadth of the 2025 to 2026 pattern is significantly wider. The climate change dimension adds a layer of complexity that's hard to reconcile. Canada is warming approximately twice as fast as the global average. Arctic amplification reduces the temperature gradient between the poles and mid-latitudes. Research suggests this destabilizes the jet stream and may make polar vortex disruptions more frequent. Yet NOAA cautions that the science remains unsettled. Every way people have tried to look at this question has produced some evidence for a connection and some evidence against. Here's the paradox. 2026 is projected globally as one of the 4 hottest years on record, yet Canada is enduring one of its coldest winters in decades. Severe cold hasn't disappeared in a warming world. It's become more erratic, more concentrated, and more dangerous when it arrives. The contrast between Vancouver's snow-free winter and Yukon's minus 55.7 degree record illustrates how climate change doesn't produce uniform effects. It amplifies extremes in both directions. Let me walk you through the timeline of major events this winter so you can understand just how relentless this has been. December 23rd, Yukon records minus 55.7 degrees, Canada's coldest in 50 years. December 28th, Pimicikamak Cree Nation loses power, leading to evacuation of over 4,000 people. January 5th to 14th, Toronto experiences a false spring warm spell that makes the following cold even more brutal. January 22nd to 24th, the prairies shatter multiple all-time cold records. January 23rd to 27th, Winter Storm Fern kills 171 people across North America and dumps a record 46 centimeters on Toronto in a single day. January 25th to 27th, Montreal's power crisis leaves over 20,000 customers without electricity. January 25th, Newfoundland's Bay d'Espoir hydroelectric plant shuts down for the first time since 1967. February 1st to 3rd, the third nor'easter in 3 weeks hits Atlantic Canada. February 7th to 9th, Toronto's cold streak peaks at 18 consecutive days without melting. February 17th to 18th, the Prairie Megastorm drops up to 50 centimeters across Saskatchewan. February 18th, the GTA ice storm triggers 160 collisions in one day. February 21st, the high Arctic breaks multiple temperature records. February 22nd to 24th, another major nor'easter buries Atlantic Canada with up to 40 centimeters. That's not a normal winter. That's a cascading sequence of extreme events driven by an atmospheric pattern that locked into place and refused to budge. Every province from British Columbia's northeast to Newfoundland's Avalon Peninsula has dealt with some form of winter weather crisis. The dangerous part isn't just one storm or one cold snap. It's the sustained nature of the pattern. It's the fact that there's been no relief. It's that communities get hit, try to recover, and then get hit again before they've even finished digging out from the last event. The human cost extends beyond the statistics. When you're shoveling snow for the 5th time in a week and you're 60 years old with a history of heart disease, that 16% increased risk of heart attack becomes very real. When you're homeless in Toronto and the warming centers are full, that -30 wind chill isn't just uncomfortable, it's life-threatening. When you're a livestock producer in Saskatchewan trying to keep animals alive in -40 cold with feed costs soaring, that's financial survival on the line. When you're one of the 4,000 evacuees from Pimicikamak and you don't know when you'll be able to return home, that's displacement and trauma. Infrastructure has been tested to its limits, and in some cases beyond. Power grids have come within a hair's breadth of failure. Hydro-Quebec issued Level 2 alerts. Yukon nearly faced rolling blackouts. Newfoundland dodged rotating outages only because divers manually cleared fragile ice from the Bay d'Espoir intake. Road networks have been overwhelmed. Half of Saskatchewan's highways under travel not recommended advisories. The Trans-Canada Highway closed. Major urban centers struggling to keep arterial routes passable. Aviation disrupted on a scale usually seen only during volcanic ash events or major hurricanes. The next 4 to 6 weeks are critical. The pattern will eventually break, but the question is when and how abruptly. Rapid transitions can be just as dangerous as the sustained cold itself. Flash freezes after brief thaws create treacherous ice conditions. Heavy rain on deep snowpack causes flooding. Rapid temperature swings stress infrastructure that's already been weakened by months of extreme conditions. And then there's the spring melt. All that snow has to go somewhere. Rivers and streams that are currently frozen solid will thaw and swell. Ground that's frozen to depths of several feet won't absorb meltwater efficiently. Urban drainage systems, designed for gradual spring melts, will face weeks' worth of accumulation, trying to drain in days. British Columbia's flood forecasters are already raising red flags. The Fraser River Basin, the Thompson River, the Okanagan, all face elevated risk if the melt happens quickly. The Red River in Manitoba and the Assiniboine River have flooded catastrophically in the past. The spring of 2026 could bring a repeat if conditions align wrong. Eastern Canada's rivers, from the Ottawa to the St. Lawrence tributaries to Newfoundland's coastal streams, all carry elevated snowpack heading into melt season. What you need to understand is that this winter isn't over when the calendar turns to spring. The impacts will cascade for months. Flood risk extends into May and June. Infrastructure damage from freeze-thaw cycles won't fully reveal itself until temperatures stabilize. Economic losses will continue accumulating as businesses tally disruption costs, insurance companies process claims, and governments assess public infrastructure repairs. Agricultural impacts will carry into planting season. Mental health effects from months of extreme conditions displacement, and stress will persist. Canada has weathered brutal winters before: the 1998 ice storm, the 2013 to 2014 polar vortex, the January 1996 blizzard. But what makes 2025 to 2026 exceptional is the combination of factors: record-breaking snowfall in multiple provinces, extreme cold across vast geographic areas for sustained periods, infrastructure failures from power grids to water systems, a locked atmospheric pattern that shows no signs of releasing. And all of this happening in a country that's warming faster than the global average, creating a paradox that's hard for many people to reconcile. The science is clear on what happened. A stratospheric sudden warming event split the polar vortex. One core descended over North America. Blocking patterns locked it in place. La Niña and the QBO phase created favorable conditions for the disruption. The jet stream became highly amplified. Arctic air that should have stayed near the pole spilled south and stayed there. Climate change may be influencing the frequency of these disruptions through Arctic amplification, but the exact mechanisms are still being studied. What matters now is understanding that this pattern has at least 2 to 4 more weeks to run based on every available forecast model. Early March, at the earliest, for meaningful pattern change. Potentially volatile transition through mid-March. Spring flood risk elevated through May and June. And lessons that need to be learned about infrastructure resilience, emergency preparedness, and climate adaptation. If you live in eastern or central Canada, prepare for cold to persist. Stock essentials. Check heating systems. Know where warming centers are located. Watch for signs of carbon monoxide if you lose power. Limit outdoor exposure during extreme wind chill events. Check on vulnerable neighbors. Keep vehicles fueled and equipped with emergency supplies. Monitor forecast updates because when this pattern finally breaks, the transition could be rapid. This has been one of the most extreme winter weather patterns Canada has seen in years. The polar vortex split, the atmosphere locked, and an entire country has been dealing with the consequences for months. The pattern will eventually break. Spring will eventually arrive. But the timeline is measured in weeks, not days, and the impacts will echo for months beyond that. Stay safe out there.